Jaspreet Kaur Sangha, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Media Watch. I'm your host, Dr. Sevi. Now this week we have a normal show, which is covering off the news from around the world, and one particular news in question. A lot of people have been talking about the success of a party known as AAP in India. We won't go into that in too much detail, but we will cover it soon. So the format of the show is we take one news headline, we take a number of news headlines from around the world, and we also look at Sikh news in particular. This week, I've got a fantastic guest with us. I've been trying to convince her to come on the show since we first met, and she's agreed. And I'd like to introduce to you Jaspreet Kaur.
Yeah.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you again, and thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we met actually over in Saffron Mic 4, right?
Yeah, back in November. Yeah, that was the first time we met when we were doing our poetry there.
We were doing our poetry, absolutely. Yeah. It was really good, really impressive, actually.
Really good event.
And one of the things I noted in particular was the way that you took the research that you did, which you'll tell us about in a minute, and then you took it to another level, which is through the spoken word, right, to interpret it. Tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of what you've been studying, particular subject area, and what I'm really interested in is kind of what would be the next level on from that.
Yeah, well, basically I did my undergrad in history, and then I followed on, did my master's in gender studies, and that's what brought me on to doing my research to looking at female infanticide, specifically in Punjab. And obviously when I was thinking about what should I do my research on, I wanted it to be something specific to do with Indian community, Sikh community, but I didn't know what specifically I wanted to talk about. Until I had a conversation with my grandfather sometime last year, and he was telling me these stories about girls that have undergone female infanticide in Punjab, in the area that we were from. And then from that, I then started the research, and because I came from a history background, I wanted to look at it from a historical perspective and see why has it still developed into what we know as female infanticide today.
And it's still happening today.
And it's still happening today,
Yeah, I mean, the Punjab area is split, isn't it? Like the percentage is 45-55, kind of Sikh, Hindu, whatever that percentage is. It's close anyway. Yeah. And do you think that's kind of something that spreads across all those communities?
Well, what I found in the research, this is what I found so significant, was that the female infanticide and now female feticide, which is getting rid of the fetus because they found out it's a girl, is mainly happening in the Sikh communities there. And the hypocrisy is that the Sikh religion believes that men and women should be seen as equal before God and in our daily lives, and that from her kings are born. That's what our Barney tells us.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's not coming out in our actual lives, and our culture has now become so mixed up because it's not following what Sikhi is teaching us, and female infanticide is still happening. Do
you think that's a thing that's specific for India? Because, I mean, let's go to that news headline right now, which is the fact that the AAP party have won in Delhi. Now, the difference is I think they have an election for the whole of the country, which I think BJP actually won quite successfully, and through a landslide, or whatever they used that term. And on the other side of it, they had a landslide with the AAP party over in Delhi in particular. I think it was something like, I think if you know the figures in detail, I think it's number of seats, the way it works. It's something like, I think BJP only got about 3 and they got the rest, and everybody else didn't get anything. But for me, when I look at it, I think it doesn't matter what party is in place, because I really don't want to kind of labour too much about that particular win. Whoever wins, good luck to them. But are they in a position to bring about change in terms of policies? Now, we know about that rape case that happened a couple of years ago. We know that still today, people are being, they're molested, they're harassed in the streets. If you're a woman, it's really difficult. Is this particular to India, or do you think it happens in any other country? It just seems that we get a lot of information from that country. They don't seem to be doing anything about it,
I think, well, 2 parts to that. The fact that is this happening in other countries, we know that discrimination against women is happening worldwide, and we can see similar issues to about like girls in general. We know that in China they had the one-child policy, which also resulted in such a skewed ratio between daughters and sons, because even in China they were preferring to have a son. It was son preference there as well. We can see those common themes in different countries, but it seems that Indian society and the view that they've now developed on women, and that's been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years, has turned into this really hyper-masculine society. We can see it in the films, we can see it in their music. we can see it in their day-to-day lives, and for some reason it's not changing. We can see in different countries, in Western countries, that is changing, and the women's movement, the gender equality movement is having a huge impact. But for some reason in India, even since the Delhi rape case, which was over 2 years ago now, we haven't seen that significant change yet.
So it doesn't matter what political party comes in at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So if people take it into their own hands to elect a different government, so in this case, you've got somebody else coming in, not necessarily nationally, but kind of within the region.
Yeah.
Would you say that people power is also reflected in the tools that we might have? Now, the case in particular is about a week ago. I think it's like 4.4 million. I was reading about this particular woman who was on a plane in Mumbai on the Indigo flight, and she'd filmed this chap, this older guy who was trying to grope her, and just embarrassed him by just filming him and then putting it on YouTube, consequently getting 4.4 million hits. It's not the reason why she did it. Well, she did it to make an example of him, to say, what are you doing? Is this kind of behaviour that we expect from people today? So should we rely on people power to out these individuals? But then again, we're working on our own. We're not seeing the policies come through, are we?
That's the problem. It's like, it's not coming from the political level. Not that I want to get too much into Indian politics, but the AAP, they did actually introduce last November, they introduced 10 policies where they wanted to help women in Delhi. And the policies were good, they were useful. They were saying things like they need more CCTV on the streets, better lighting. They were saying to fast track any cases in courts that are to do with female harassment and those sorts of things. So they introduced these 10 key points that they wanted to focus on. But the thing is, none of those key 10 points mentioned anything to do with men, anything to have men involved in this movement for gender equality, nothing to do with education. And I think those are the grassroots that we need to aim for. Those are the things we need to change. We need to have an impact in the education system, have an impact on the local communities, those sorts of levels, for it to actually have an impact.
So what about the other side of media, which is like art and music and that kind of stuff, right? I mean, there are people, I won't necessarily mention them, but they do kind of distort the whole image of a woman. They make rather rude kind of statements about who they are and how they act, in Bollywood films, in particular Punjabi type songs. That doesn't do much, does it, right? In terms of enforcing that particular terrible stereotype, but also, like if people sing those songs, doesn't that mean that they start acting like that as well? That's
exactly it. It seems to be whatever's happening in the media, what they see in songs, in movies, in the whole Bollywood industry, is then what they then play out in their own lives. And yes, music, film, as much as we say those things don't influence us, they really do. And the problem is, people are going to listen to these songs where they are objectifying women, they are sexualizing women. If we look at Bollywood films today, the way that they present women aren't strong, independent, hard-working women. It's usually women that are chasing after a man and trying to live in a man's shadow. So
I think even in Bollywood, and they do say that the way that women are portrayed as kind of the weaker element, rather than, and also there's always this thing about the male lead can be as old as possible, but the female is always going to be really younger.
I read about this actually literally the other week, the fact that all these big male actors, I'm not going to name them all, but they can get as old as they... It's reflected in
both industries, Bollywood and in Hollywood as well,
And in Hollywood, they can get to about 50, 60 years old and still be the male lead character. However, the female counterpart would have to be under the age of 30, and early 20s.
Right.
So it's all these new, young female Bollywood actresses playing alongside these...
Here's the irony for you, the leading editors in Hollywood are all female.
Are all female.
It's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So maybe I should edit those bits out. Well, let's move on to the next story, which is another article, and actually we both posted at the same time on Facebook. I think actually you got ahead of me actually on that one. But this was actually an article that came out in Vice Online, and this is an article from the 5th of February, which is talking about the sex workers in Bangladesh. There's a mega brothel, they're stuck in drugs and slavery. Sometimes the women get sold for $400, have to pay back that debt. There's some horrendous stuff going on where they're injecting them with hormones because they're quite young, so you can make them look older. I mean, and these are kind of the madams of those particular brothels that are doing it. So I wanted to say just one thing, which was Steve McQueen last year, in the Oscars, and we're literally only a week or a couple of weeks away from the Oscars, had said, and I quote him from his closing lines of his speech, he says, "The last word everyone deserves, not just to survive, but to live. This is the most important legacy of Solomon Northup. Now, Solomon Northup is the character in 12 Years a Slave, based on a true story on a book that he wrote, where he was abducted from one state and taken to the south and treated as a slave. I dedicate this award to all the people who have endured slavery and the 21 million people who still suffer slavery today. Now, what he's saying here is this is still a problem. Slavery is still a problem. Women are still being moved from different parts of Africa, you know, and sold around. And this particular case in Bangladesh, literally, it's only just a few days old, this story, that we are finding that in that country and other countries, you know, this goes back to our previous story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The rights of women, the way that women are positioned, and the way that women are exploited is just unreal. Yeah,
and the thing is, with those brothels in particular, this is something that's been happening since the colonial period, since the British were there and actually introduced these types of brothels. So this has been happening for nearly 200 years or more. And the fact that in that article it was mentioning that some of the women who are at these brothels it's been going on in their families for generations, so a mother, then a daughter, and so on. And like you were saying, some of these girls are as young as 12 or 13, and they're injecting them with steroids, the same sorts of steroids that they use on cows to build them up to make them look more womanly, more voluptuous. And it's terrifying. And the fact that Bangladesh is actually legal to have brothels, and prostitution is still legal in the country itself. So if it's still legal in the justice system, then how are we ever going to change this sort of problem? Like I was saying before, like we need to have an impact in the education system, actually getting to the grassroots in society and local communities and changing their opinions.
But how do we do that? I mean, trying to position. I mean, research is brilliant. I mean, you're a research scientist. You're also, you know, up and coming teacher, etc. Yeah. But tell me, I mean, what do we do from a perspective of influence? You know, do we produce more reports? Do we show more data? Are there kind of human rights watchers that we can bring? I mean, but is anyone listening at the end of the day? Are any of these politicians doing anything about it?
To be honest, my opinion is that we can try as much as we want to try and enforce it into the political system and try and get their help, but these sorts of things won't change unless people change their way of thinking. Indian society...
So you're saying you'll do a grassroots level rather than necessarily have a policy for it?
For a policy.
Or maybe both, you know?
Yeah, because with the issue of female infanticide, a policy was introduced actually in 1870 by the British. It was called the Female Infanticide Act, which was introduced to try and end female infanticide. They repealed it in 1901, I think it was, because they assumed, oh, it must have ended by now, we've probably dealt with the problem, let's repeal it, we don't need the act anymore. However, female infanticide at that point was still continuing and still increasing and still is today. So from that particular example, a political act made no difference. And what my research was saying is that we need to target these things like the economic problem, people's opinions on women, this idea of some preference, the caste system, dowry still happening in India. All these particular issues at the grassroots levels is what we need to target.
So it's kind of the community coming together and actually saying you need to go back and actually understand that all of this is wrong.
It's
right?
wrong. Yeah.
So it would be movies, it would be documentaries, it's better education, it's kind of a whole bunch of things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. I mean, I think also, is it not the role of, when we talk about documentaries, is it not also the role of people coming forward and talking about their, you know, where they are? But a lot of these people are actually stuck, aren't they? You know, if you're stuck in a brothel, you know, if you're stuck in a situation where, you know, you're trying to fight a particular family that wants to do this, right? How can they get the courage to come forward and say, look, you know, we're going to be protected. You know, or, you know, that particular group of women that come forward are going to be protected. Should there not be safe houses and stuff? You know? No,
absolutely. I think that's one of the things with a lot of these women issues, gender issues, is that there's so much social stigma attached to these things. Be it domestic violence, be it infanticide, be it prostitution. There's so much stigma attached to it that women won't talk about it. And we need to create an environment and create a conversation where it is safe and we can show these voices, and that's part of the problem, that people are too afraid to talk about.
I think it's quite interesting because a lot of, again, it's quite ironic because you'll find that Hollywood will have UN ambassadors that bring this kind of thing in. but then again, does the UN really make that much difference?
Yeah.
You know?
I don't look against celebrities and stuff like that that are going out there and trying to do this sort of charity work, or UN ambassadors, and there's some that I completely support the work that they're doing, but are those things making such a difference? I'm not sure. They do publicise it, which is definitely a good thing, but is it making a significant difference? I don't know if it is yet.
So if we take a look at just a quick summary, I guess the only thing that governments can do is set up more money aside to try and have safe houses, better education. Maybe rather than censorship, there needs to be some kind of discussion with some of these people that make that kind of music, and say, actually, do you not think that when you're talking about this song and you treat a woman and you position a woman that thing, haven't you got a sister?
Yeah.
You know?
Do you not have a sister? You have a mother. You may have a daughter one day. Do you not see it from that perspective? Like, there was the one singer, Yo-Yo Honey Singh, who in his music has been criticised recently for looking at women in such a negative light, calling them whores, saying that he would beat his partner or woman.
That's a possible interpretation or whatever.
It's the way his language is used in the song and how it's been interpreted. And a particular girl, I think in Delhi, I think her name was Renee Verma, at I think it was a poetry slam, she did this amazing piece of poetry speaking about all these issues that Yo-Yo Honey Singh was speaking about, or other artists and Bollywood and Indian film. And she was saying that the way we're objectifying women isn't right. And the music industry really does need to think about those things and what kind of message they're putting out there.
Again, an irony where the music industry are quite quick to rush to do Band-Aid and that kind of stuff, right? But are they necessarily taking those issues forward? Now, we haven't obviously got that particular musician to come and defend himself. But, you know, maybe he's got an opportunity here to clarify that if he wants to, or make a song where he says he's sorry or whatever. You know, but ultimately, you know, if that's raising the issue, then that's good, isn't it? You know. So we're gonna, you know, we're coming close to the end. We've got a little bit of time. Now, I mentioned right at the beginning of the show where we were talking about your research. Now, you did something really, really unique thing that you did. You know, not boring research like mine, which is like, you know, print it out and stick it in the British Library. Your one actually has gone into, we call it in content, we call it repurposing, which is you repurpose the content that you have, or you change it into a different way. And in your outlet, in one sense, is to create poetry and actually say, actually, you may not have time to read all of this, but this is one way of actually getting an extract from it. That's one point. The second point is that poetry is one of those things, isn't it? As an art form, you know, just a few words can make a lot of difference and change lives.
Absolutely.
You know, so that's my personal opinion. Do you think is that the reason why you went down that route, to kind of create spoken word from some of the research? Yeah,
that was exactly what I was aiming for, because I knew not everyone has the time or the access to read my long piece of research.
I'm sure it's good though.
It's definitely a good piece of work to read, but I know not everyone's got the time for that. So I sat and I thought, how can I put this in a way that everyone can have access to it, and to start this conversation and start this dialogue about gender inequality and specifically female infanticide. And I'd been writing poetry for years by that point, and then I've put it into a form of a poem, and then I shared it with people that I knew, and then when the Saffron Mic event came up, I thought, why not go and present it there?
Yeah, it did really well. And it's really good. I think you got a fantastic response from the audience. It was really, I think every piece was amazing in terms of what people put across, but yours was very good. Initially we had Amit on earlier on, actually, didn't we, in last year? He performed some really good songs as well. So let's listen to some, right? We've got time, and you can take your time to read and take the stage. You know?
Take the stage, yeah. Well, this particular piece I actually only wrote about 2 weeks ago, and the title is called Red Books, and it's basically talking about the issues within humanity at the moment, and it's actually a conversation that I kind of wrote that I might have with my child in the future, whenever they would ask me, oh mum, what was it like when you were young? So that's the kind of story behind it. So this is my poem, Red Books. Mama, what was the world like when you were young? Oh, my little love, what can I say? I wish I could tell you about days that were genuinely okay, but we weren't the most humanly humans. I'm sorry that we tainted the history that you have to read. We stained those pages as our brothers and sisters would bleed. We tainted our history with the blood of innocence. Oh, my little love. I'm afraid to tell you of stories of children terrified to go to school, men with misinterpretations claiming their thoughts would rule, whilst these children would fear that nightmares would thunder through those doors with their bullets, ricocheting through their skin like waves in a flood, their school shirts pierced, their school books covered with their young blood. Oh, my little love. I'm afraid to tell you stories of kidnapped girls, hundreds, taken, sold, missing. Every screen I saw said, bring back our girls, bring back our girls. We lost young souls as precious as pearls. But after a week, it was no longer trending. Our concerns were no longer sending. Our empathy was no longer extending. Our Facebook charity events had no one attending. Oh, my little love. I'm afraid to tell you that men would starve themselves to death to find justice. Hunger strikes weren't just left to the suffragettes. These means were adopted by brave men in India, Thailand, and in the West. But governments continued with their cruelty and their numbness. They remained posted on their pedestals, and like blind mice we trusted. Oh, my little love. I'm afraid to tell you that these stories were only on the news for a day or all the way on page 15, mixed up in a media misrepresentation machine. No one cared about those darker races. Baby, no one cared about those faraway places. I'm afraid you'll ask me, little love, what did I do? Who were you? And I'm afraid I'll have nothing to say. I'm sorry that we tainted the history that you have to read. We stained those pages as our brothers and sisters would bleed. We tainted our history with the blood of innocence. We'll grow the trees for the paper of those history books with the tears of those mothers. Injustice. I close my eyes and I see libraries stacked with shelves of history books blackened with blood. I'm afraid our children will look to us in shame. Us bystanders will be the ones to blame. Our children will search for heroes, and to us they shall look. But all we will do is hand them stained red books.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing that in and showing it.
Thank
and
you.
I think it's really illustrative of, you know, kind of I always say about poetry that it kind of creates images in your mind, right? And they kind of, they're everlasting and they have an impact. It kind of creates a ripple effect. And that kind of, you know, that illustration is for me saying, here's the poem that's been put into the pond, and the ripple effect is all the things that people pick up as part of the sound waves that you produced. So thanks so much for that. Yeah. We wish you all the best in terms of your future and all the stuff that you're going to be doing. Yeah. I know you've got some great stuff in the pipeline.
Thank you.
I do think also wonderful in terms of the research, and in my points were just purely that research is great as long as people are listening to it.
Yeah.
And I think also really interesting sharing those kind of ideas with you about what we can do in terms of influence, and I really like the point that you made about this kind of the grassroots level. You know, unless we change ourselves, you know, in our societies, we're not necessarily going to see the impact as much as we'd like to. Sure, we want to have government backing, but appreciate it very much. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having
Well, that's it for this week. We hope you enjoyed our show, the Media Watch Show. If you want to send me an email, you can do that at Seek Channel. And where you do that is by doing info@seekchannel.tv. You can follow the Twitter hashtag, which is #MediaWatch, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.